Hi, everyone. My name is Valérie Déus, and I'm the moderator of this conversation here we're going to have. I'm super nervous. I don't do this regularly, so it's going to be awkward, and that's that. Just applauding my awkwardness. Thank you. So, can everyone introduce themselves? Yes, please. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nadine. I'm a filmmaker and I'm from South Africa.
Hey, how y'all doing? I got here 2 minutes before this started. Shout out to the valet. My name is Connolly, and I work with the Association for Black Economic Power.
My name is tran-myhre. My stage name is Guante. I'm a poet, and I work with an organization here in town called True Art Speaks, which does kind of critical literacy and youth leadership work through spoken word and hip-hop culture.
Hi, I'm Susan Shehata, and I help people clear the hidden obstacles in their life through identifying and unwinding their hidden core beliefs, limiting core beliefs, and yes. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Oh. Hello. Oh, thank you. All right. So let's begin this conversation. I feel like today our conversation has sort of come up in different parts of the day. So let's kind of continue this conversation. So we are going to focus on. I have all of these notes. So I wanted to sort of, I guess, maybe start with the idea of protecting ourselves in this tumultuous time. Like, how do you protect yourself, or how do you protect others in the community, or how do we begin that, or what does it look like, I guess?
I mean, I don't really want to go first because I got a lot to say, so I want to So I'm gonna say this first. I have an answer to this question, but I have an asterisk because when we talk about the work in social justice movements, we talk about creating the safe spaces. There has to be some acceptance that pain and getting hurt is a part of the process. And a lot of times when we focus so much on protecting ourselves, we create barriers between one another. And so I think when we I'm going to talk about my practice and how I protect myself, but in my approach in doing that, I try to also be understanding of I still want to be able to connect with you, and I still want you to have a piece, be able to see who I am. So there's a vulnerability that I would want to maintain in community and even in difficult situations. So I don't practice things of protection that stop me from being able to show up and fully be myself, or keep someone else from being able to do that, first. Second, I just seal my aura. It's basically, I try to call back my spent energy, and then I just kind of seal that bitch, golden rain sprinkles, cleanse that energy and just seal it up. And that's a practice of meditation that I do when I'm feeling all out in the world. And I think it's something that's totally customized depending on what it is, but it's a spiritual practice of just being mindful of my field of energy and sealing that off so that I feel held and that my energy isn't accessible for anybody or any circumstance to just suck all of that out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, coming from the South African perspective, maybe to think about three things, because I don't know if anyone knows about the Rhodes Must Fall movement, the student uprising in South Africa that was started by the Roads Must Fall movement. So I was part of that in 2015, around that time. And, we would occupy spaces, for example. And then, yes, we spoke about self-care because that occupied space could actually become very toxic, even though you try to make it as safe or safer rather as possible. And people had different ideas of how to self-care because there were certain comrades, as we say, that felt like, but the space should be able to provide the self-care because everyone's going through the same thing. But I'm of the feeling that I think you need to get out of the space in order to self-care because everyone's just going, the emotion is high, adrenaline is high, everybody's thinking of what to do next and not checking in properly. I mean, it got to that stage. And then I'm also an educator. I teach Afrikaans, which is a very controversial language in South Africa. But the way I teach it is Afrikaans is actually a black language that was stolen. So the way I teach in my class is like 50% of my lesson is a history lesson, and you have to allow people to speak about their feelings towards the language before you can teach it, because you cannot teach Afrikaans going in cold, like just starting. It's very heavy. So, and then also to say to the students that there is no hierarchy in pain, and that all pain is valid, and to try and create that safe space even in the classroom where we can debate. And sometimes I have classes that are just conversational, where we're not actually doing any grammar or things like that, but just talking about our feelings towards certain things, about certain Afrikaans films we've seen, or just the debate about Afrikaans. And then also, as a filmmaker, then creating a safe space is very difficult because you're either the only woman in the room or the only black person in the room. And I don't know, I think your spiritual life has to be very strong also to get through that. And recently, I also had a breakdown because I was working with an all-white male crew, and we filmed a scene that I felt was sensitive. We filmed a young farm worker woman teaching her mother how to write. And then, so I'm there, and I look around me, and it's like just white males. And then I started crying because I felt like, I felt like I was selling out, because that should not have been the crew that was with me, but I didn't choose that crew. And then I just had to have an open discussion with the producer, and I told them, this is really difficult for me to do. And then they admitted that they had faltered in that department. So it's about having open discussions, and that's just my thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate these first two responses, because I think it's easy to hear that question and immediately jump to the idea of self-care, which has become such a buzzword. And I think it's very often seen as such an individual thing, like I'm gonna eat this whole piece of cake, or eat this whole cake, or I'm gonna play video games all day. And that can be a thing if you need to do that. But I'm very grateful for people in my life who have taught me about self-care as not an individual thing, but as an us thing, as a community thing, as being about relationships. And that's how I've tried to take care of myself, not just trying to think about my own mental health on a given day, but thinking about the relationships that I can cultivate of people who will hold me accountable, which is a different way of thinking about self-care, but it's been really, I think, revolutionary to my own practice, if that makes sense.
And you specifically used the word protection, which I think is an interesting thing, because I mentioned that I help people identify and unwind limiting beliefs. And most of our limiting beliefs, they came from experiences that we had when we were young, oftentimes traumatic experiences. And so we come into these places where we start to protect ourselves, because of these experiences that we had. So a lot of these things that we're already consciously or unconsciously doing are protective behaviors. So I think it's interesting because obviously you're asking in that more, how do we protect ourselves with everything that's going on? And I think part of that is distinguishing between the things that we're doing that are healthy self-protective qualities and things that are protective that are actually damaging or holding us back in some way.
Oh, great, this works out, okay. That was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed those answers. When I got the question, I immediately thought, how do I answer this? How would I answer this? And so I sent it to this group of friends that I have, and then I was asking them, and then we realized in the conversation that I was like, oh, you're the group that I have for protection. Like that was where I went for that. But it was like exactly my first thought was like, I need to ask them. And then we were talking and all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, it's you guys, thanks, yay. They were like that community that I go to when it's like, things feel crazy or things I can't get through things and it's only like 2 other folks. They live on the other side of the country, and we have this little text thing that we go on forever, and anything that happens, they are who I turn to. I often think of it as community and sort of like how do we, I like the idea of like also holding each other accountable, because I think sometimes we get into this sort of, this idea of an echo chamber, but also this idea of sort of like, I don't want you to call me out on my shit. But I need that. It's so important to keep me on top of things. And so that idea of protection for me is kind of broad in so many different ways. All right, let's go to the next question, I guess. Okay. They're all over my page. So my second question, I thought, was sort of in the idea of, there's so many things that came up in the first question, like isolation and trust is important and all those different ideas of like, have to trust people and also just isolating yourself to like recharge to a certain degree. But and this is for everyone in the panel or anyone in the panel, how has your approach to your work sort of changed, or has it changed in the last year or two? What kind of things I guess you focus on more, or what feels more urgent in a sense to deal with in a sense? Yeah.
Okay, I get. You said I had to go first, and I think I can in terms of the question, because it is difficult to hear and there's no monitor. So about our approach to our own work and how that has shifted. Yeah. When I was first getting started, I got started in like an organizing space and an art space kind of around the same time when I was, a teenager or whatever. And for a long time, I tried to keep them very separate in terms of like, this is my art over here and this is my activism over here. Because I didn't want to be one of those people who was like, oh, my song about racism is going to change the world, right? And I think the older that I get, the more that I see the necessity of finding spaces of synergy where those realms can come together for a couple of reasons. One, just in terms of our own personal energy, my own personal energy, like having the time to do the work that I want to do. So finding places where they overlap is really important. But I also think that there's so much power in the importance of like narrative, which we've seen in a million different campaigns politically and socially over the past few years. There's so much room for more, I guess, deeper, more organic collaborations between arts and activist work. There are a million like concrete examples, but I imagine we'll probably come back to that at some point. Yeah.
Anyone else?
So I think that obviously there's a lot going on the planet right now, and what it's doing is it's really forcing people to pay attention on a number of different levels. And because I've been working for 15 years with people on what's going on internally and how that's manifesting in their external reality, I think one of the things that's happening in the last year is the urgency of that. People are really seeing like, oh shit, I really actually have to take a look at these things, because it's no longer something that's all swept under the rug. Like, we've been sweeping it under the rug for so long that now we're like tripping on the stuff that's, the rug is bumpy and we're tripping on the rug. So one of the things that I'm really seeing in the last year is people are really showing up to do the work in a variety of ways, obviously on a global scale, but individually. Like, for a long time, the kind of work that I did or do with people doing that inner self work that was really a certain kind of person that did that work. And now even as we were hearing like on the different panels today, people are like, I'm going to therapy and all these things are opening up, and I'm just in the back going like, yeah, because I think that this is the kind of stuff that I've been trying to get people to pay attention to for a long time, and saying like, yeah, you really got to look inside and then see like how those things are showing up in the world around you. And now it seems like, guess what, we don't have a choice anymore, we have to do that. And so I think that that's what's changed in the last work, is people really are showing up and doing it, maybe because we don't have a choice.
That is definitely true. I've gotten lots more therapy and body work lately. Like, it's not even, I feel like it's not even like things that I necessarily do, but it's like the toxicity in the world and things that are happening just, it's like seeping into my spine and just messing me up, and I'm like, I gotta get this worked out somehow, yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch on that and say that, in terms of film, also the younger audiences are becoming more woke. And so there's a lot more. And so I think the audience for a certain type of work and conversation around film is growing. So that's an exciting space to be in, because I could now do a film about the RMF movement, for example, and know that there will be an audience for that film, whereas maybe 5 years ago there wouldn't have been. Now people want to talk about it. People want to see gender being represented differently in film. I think now who is telling the story has become more important as well. So the way people are engaging with film is interesting, and so it also allows me a certain space. And also in terms of language, I'm interested in representing like Afrikaans differently, the way different people speak Afrikaans. I'm sure, if you speak English a certain way, you get judged, and the same with Afrikaans. If you come from a certain community and you speak Afrikaans a certain way, you are, get stereotyped. But I'm trying in my work to say you can speak Afrikaans a certain way and still be a dignified character, be a hero. So I'm also playing with language, indigenous languages, as well as using different characters in my stories now moving forward. Yeah, so that's
dope.
the last year has grown.
So 2 parts to those 2 questions. That works. How many people believe in seasons of life, like different seasons? So like, y'all are way ahead of me because I didn't know about that shit. And I looked up when I had moved jobs. So you were talking about like the last few years. I moved jobs from working in like a social movement type organization to like starting an organization and working within it. And so I went through this season of what I call acclimation. And what it felt like was like drowning and dying slowly and painfully. And it felt like unrelenting anxiety. It felt like depression. It felt like self-doubt. In that moment, it felt like so many things. And now that I look back, I realize that like those were seasons where I was like, I think a lot of times we think in a capitalistic way, we're always thinking like the next step up, instead of thinking about like how we're evolving and revolving in this space. And like we're never really moving up or down. We're just the different shapes of how we are, like a kaleidoscope, are being strengthened as a person, and you're just being churned. And for me, like the last few years, that's happened to me my whole life, but I didn't know that that's what it was. And then I look back at those seasons where I struggled and I was like fucked up and I was like, nobody talk to me, and I was depressed. And a lot of those things are right. Like I was just fucking depressed and like that shit was real. But I think about what happened after and how like I was this different, there was a different face to like who I was, and something within me was coming to the forefront and was being developed. And now I have an appreciation for those seasons, and I let them flow. Like I did a Facebook Live, like don't go follow me now because I'm about to tell you some shit I did on Facebook. But like, I mean you can, but like that's hella petty. But like, so I did this Facebook Live thing where like I just broke down and was talking about some shit that had recently happened, and I was just weeping. about what's happened to Black women in the movement, and how in movement spaces Black women have been treated so shittily, and I was just mourning for that and like in pain, but I also had so much hope. And the thing that I had said at the end was like, I'm so hopeful because we have so many amazing Black women at the forefront doing amazing things, and I know that we're gonna keep going. And that's that like just season, right? So for me, what I've learned is just how to trust those seasons, how to let myself acclimate, and how to know that when I feel like I can't breathe, that's really just the moment where I'm learning how to float, right? Like my body is realizing like I'm learning how to rise above. And sometimes like you be in 3 feet water, like, oh nigga, I'm drowning. Like, nigga, you stand up. You ain't drowning, it's 3 feet of water. So, so it's just that process. And I think the urgency part for me is really like kind of what you were talking about is blending the artistry of my work and the professional side. Like I came from being a singer-songwriter, like I was doing plays, I was on Fringe, and like people knew me like that. And now like I'm over here like establishing a credit union, and people are like, you ain't an artist, you got money now. And I'm like, no, like I am. I'm still kind of broke. Like it's just like you kind of get pushed out of your identity when you start to, that when one face of who you are takes like the precedence. So the urgency that I feel is trying to make space for other people to be their full selves, to trust the seasons that I'm in. And like right now I'm wearing that hat and that's dope. But also know that like another season may come where like I just might bust out with a new song and y'all won't be ready. So, you know, that's my answer.
I love how the point that you bring up about trust, it's like, how do you trust that? How do you find the way to trust that? How do you learn how to trust, I guess? Part of my thing is that I don't, as much as my body and my spirit tells me things, I'm always sort of like stuck in my head. And so it becomes like, okay, how do I get this A? How do I make this perfect? How do I do this thing? Which is why I'm so nervous right now. But like, how do you just let it happen and just trust that this season will come and you will move through it and it'll.
Yeah. I mean, I think the how is looking back and remembering that you did it before. You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you do that in 8th grade when like you was being bullied by somebody and you didn't want to go back to school and you was like, I'm about to jump off this bridge, and you still went to school? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you do that? And like remembering to trust yourself, like, bitch, you got this. You done did this shit. This might look a little different, but you got this. You did this already. And I think it's identifying the moments that you've already conquered and seeing that like the new moments that you face are just a little bit different. It's the same you that conquered the last 20 whatever years, right? And like you have that in you, just pull it forward and trust that like you've done this before. We've all done this before. Bring that person to the forefront and give yourself an opportunity to celebrate that strength again.
Nice, that was awesome, actually. I'm like, it's like this weird, sweaty church moment for me.
We need an organ.
Yeah, exactly, I need an organ.
Don't tempt me.
All right. So one of the other questions I have is, I guess we talked a little bit about that. The idea of like our habits of renewal, or how do we renew ourselves? You like to sort of separate yourself and sort of isolate and have the golden rain and the whole sort of like spiritual, which I totally connect with because that's part of what I do too. Just sort of like lock myself away and just have my time to regather my strength. Are there other methods that other people use, or are there things that you do to renew, to be out there again, to continue to be able to be healthy enough to do what you want to do or do what you need to do?
Sure. Ritual is really important to me, and it's one of the things that I teach my clients about, because I think it's really easy to overlook just doing those things. You know, you were talking about self-care and how it has become this like really like, self-care, go to the spa or go to the whatever. And it's like, self-care to me is not something that maybe it can fall in those categories of like massage, chiropractic adjustment, all of those kinds of things. But to me, those daily daily rituals that we do for renewal are even more important. Personally, a couple of the things I do is I work with the elements, earth, air, water, and fire, as a way to purify my spirit. So specifically water, this is something that always kind of takes people by surprise, but I bathe twice a day. And the reason that I do that is because it's not hygiene in the traditional sense. It's more like spiritual hygiene. Is because it feels good to like clear things off. When you experience tension and then you take a shower and you clear it off. So I work with people who've experienced trauma. So I'm spending my days like working really closely with people who are deep inside of something, and I do 3-hour sessions with people. So I am deep inside of stuff with people. So I want to show up clear for that. So I process a lot in dream time, meaning I have like really colorful, crazy dreams. So I don't want to take my like lion chasing me into your session. So I start my morning by, it's also kind of like my meditation time because I'm not like a traditional meditator. So I just take a bath and I just really clear off all of the stuff that's kind of gathered in my mind or tension that I might have with like my husband or whatever sort of thing happened that morning. And I just clear that off, and then I show up for my day with my clients, and then at the end of the day I bathe all of that stuff off so that I'm not taking that into my personal time. And that's just like one of the rituals that I use, and it's just very, very simple. It's literally working with the element of water.
I think earlier was Javier talking about saying yes to stuff, right? And my answer to this question is it's not the opposite. It's about saying no to stuff, which I don't think are mutually exclusive, but like learning how to say no and no and no to a lot of stuff. Like if you're interested in my work and you want to meet for coffee, we're never going to meet for coffee. I just can't. But partly as an introvert, like that's really, really exhausting. But then partly just in terms of time and all that. So I think saying no to stuff is very cleansing and it's good for me in terms of my own mental health. But I think also on a deeper like social justice level, I think for me, in the identities that I hold, I have to say no to more stuff, and I have to always have a list of like recommendations of other artists and other organizers and other people who I would like to pass on to kind of like spread that well. So saying no in both senses has been really, really helpful for me too.
I can say, oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, it's also just empowering. It's like just being able to it's like there's a part of, I think, of a lot of us who feel like we have to say yes because, well, we don't know when this is going to, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I should be thankful for everything that comes up to the door. It's like, but no, not everything that comes to the door needs to come to my house. It's like, I don't want all of this. I don't need all of this. It's like, so saying no, I'm like, I really like that. Yes.
And that fear of missing out piece, I think a lot of people
FOMO.
don't say no because FOMO, there's just so much fear of missing out. So it's important to learn.
Does anybody in here have a Himalayan salt lamp?
Yeah.
Y'all, we're the cool ones. So like, I don't really know if that shit works, but that should be working for me. Right? Like I be having my Himalayan salt lamp by my bed. I be like, it's me and you, Himalaya. Like turn that shit on. So like natural elements. I think having an altar. Like some people get a little bit weird about that, but like having a place to put your dreams, your intentions, your ancestry, and to bless that and to like ground yourself in that. I be having like hella crystals and rocks. Like I be getting them from what's that store?
Enchanted Rock Garden?
Precious, no.
Present Moment?
Present Moments. And I be trying to read like what does this really do? But I be like, I can feel it. Like I just like be just deciding. You know what I'm saying? Like you just gotta like get a practice, ritual, right? So like that's one thing. And I like burn sage when like people's energy, like in my office, people they know from a hallway down, like, oh, it's one of them days. I be up in there like the devil is a lie. After people leave and it's like leave funky energy, like no, like so get some sage bundles. I got that at Present Moments too. We need a black Present Moments. Just gonna say that. But I mean Present Moments, no shade. I'm just saying. So so like that, and then also I'm actually it's super dope. We've been talking about like the yes and the no because I want to know more about what Javier said. But I was gonna say like don't take yourself so seriously. And one way you can practice this and like life so seriously is like get around some little kids. Like some little ass, almost like baby kids. I'm so serious. Get around some little kids. If you don't got your own little baby kids, go borrow a friend's kids for like a day and just say yes to everything they ask. Like, have your budget ready. You know what I'm saying? And like try to find a way to get to yes, but like watch how that adventure just like unfolds, because you'll be in some crazy shit by like hour 3. And like they'll have you doing some crazy stuff. And like when you just learn to say yes to someone that has such a open, like everything's just so like cool, we can do everything, like, you know, like hot dogs and the cereal, and like, you know, they just be coming up with like hella crazy stuff. And I have 3 kids, and like I try this because I'm always like on snap mode, like no, like they just be like, can I breathe? No, like before I even think about what they ask, and I'd be like, no, you can't. So it's like helps me to make that practice to getting around some little kids. If you have your own, sometimes you can't use your own, so like get around somebody else's kids if you don't want to use yours, and like just say yes to them, because like sometimes your kids don't be deserving that shit, but if you need to do it, you know what I'm talking about? Like, we ain't using y'all for the experiment this week because y'all fucked up. I'm gonna go to so-and-so's house. I'm gonna take their kids out and say yes all day. Don't ask my kids if I've done that, because they'll be like, yeah. So I just get around some little kids and like have an adventure. Like remind yourself of like how like this shit is like a blink of an eye and life is short, and just have some unexpected crazy fun. So.
I'm not sure where we are. Is anybody else going to answer? Okay. I have another question about businesses. Do you think that businesses, wait, what time is it? Are we good on time? Okay, good. All right. I'm sorry. What role do you think businesses play, in a sense at all, in sort of the climate that we're in, the times that we're in? What's their responsibility? Do they have a responsibility? Yeah.
You got an answer for that? You ready for that?
Yes, they absolutely do. I think it's actually a really wonderful opportunity for businesses to attempt to align with their values, because they're getting a chance to do that in a real way. I mean, they always have the opportunity to, but I think that conscious entrepreneurship is really important. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, and I think that an important part of being a business owner is not just how I'm serving clients on a day-to-day basis, but what am I contributing to the bigger world around me, and how might I do things that can be in alignment with my personal values that are also contributing to the community in a bigger way. So I think businesses have a naturally built-in opportunity to do that if they choose to take it. And I think there's a lot of really easy ways that businesses can do that, whether it's, you know, through some sort of fundraising type thing, or aligning with a specific organization, or giving back to the community. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for businesses to do that. But even as individual entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, artists, I think there's a lot of ways that we can just, you know, look to our personal values and see how we might align with something that we're passionate about.
Yeah, I think, again, looking at film specifically, you know, you're dealing with a visual medium, so the responsibility you carry is huge in terms of what you're putting out there. And so I own my own, film production company. And so in terms of, so you're thinking of who, you know, sometimes you work for other companies, and sometimes you're putting your independent things out there. And when you work independently, then I think the responsibility is on you, on who you're hiring in all phases. And what are you putting out there on the screen? So in terms of film business, and also like what you're doing out of the creating content space. So what are you doing for that community, and what are you doing for the emerging filmmakers coming out there? So I try, it's not always easy, but I try to meet up with younger filmmakers. I was serving on, we have a documentary filmmakers association in South Africa, and I was the chairperson, I was co-chairperson, then chairperson, and then I decided to leave the organizer, that specific space, because like in South Africa, the problem is in many organizations we'll have a committee or a subcommittee that deals with transformation, and that for me is just so whack, weird, because it shouldn't be a subcommittee's job. It should be the core of your foundation, right? And so that's why back in Cape Town, I also haven't joined certain new organizations being formed, because I don't feel like transformation blackness should be a committee thing, should be the thing, right? So that's my critique of kind of what's happening in that space and the responsibilities we have as filmmakers, not just for content, but in the organizations that we join and what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can just very, very briefly, I think a metaphor that I've really come to enjoy, I haven't put it in a poem or a song or anything, I only ever talk about it at panel discussions, but one of my favorite metaphors is the idea that, like, we talk about planting seeds, like a business, not just a business, but a nonprofit, an artist, any type of entity can plant seeds with their presence and their brand and whatever. Like, if you tweet Black Lives Matter, like, that plants a seed. But there's a difference between planting seeds by, like, willy-nilly throwing wildflower seeds in the air and, like, intentionally planting crops. And that's, I think, the key to that question for me is not just are we doing good stuff in the world, but are we intentionally working together to do the best stuff we could do? Which it's not. I don't think that's a semantic difference, right? And I think a lot of, particularly when we talk about companies, but this again relates to other types of entities and brands, could sometimes push ourselves a little bit more to ask those deeper, more critical, more difficult, more uncomfortable questions about that good work.
I don't adhere to the capitalistic paradigm. I don't believe that is like a fruitful pathway towards like our future as a species, as humans. So I don't really know, like that's kind of like a contradictory question for me. But I do support cooperative economics. And so I would say a business could convert to a co-op or a solidarity-based entity where we can move closer towards a resource-based economy outside of a monetary system.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds awesome. I've been trying to start a susu here for the longest, and I'm trying to figure out who wants to do this with me, but I gotta find. Anybody wants to start a susu, please come see me. I'll explain what it is when we get together. Yeah, all about it. I'm all about the susu. All right, so let's start with the Q&A. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions? Anywhere, for anything? Oh, no, not for me, no. I can explain it later. Yeah, it's long, yeah. Anybody else? Question? For the panel?
As an empath, lately I've been struggling with finding a balance between connecting with people and taking on their pain. So I'm wondering what kind of advice you have for protecting yourself while still like not completely blocking yourself from connecting to other people.
I think like for example in film, right, we are interviewing people and connect and being with them in really hectic personal situations, and you do take on a lot of energy and you're empathizing, and sometimes you break down as well. And I think there's this thing where people say you can't cry as the director or whatever, and you must hold the space. But I think it's okay to go there. But yeah, the question is, what do you do when you leave that moment? And it's really difficult. But I feel like just talking to your friends and just having someone or a space or a group that you go to and speak about openly what just happened is important. I mean, at that stage, when I was doing the Ashley Creel film, for example, his sisters were saying, but they wished that I had spoken to them about what I was going through. But at that moment, I felt like, well, I needed to be the strong one, and I felt like I couldn't speak to them, but I was speaking to other people that were removed from what was happening, removed from that interview space, for example.
I think empathy is a really challenging thing to work with. I have a couple things to say about it. I think it's important to understand why we are absorbing things from other people. For a long time, I feel like I took on the suffering of other people as a way to connect, because if I wasn't connected to their suffering, it left me feeling disconnected from them altogether. So I found healthier ways to feel connected. That helped. And the second part is the thing I was saying about the ritual and the bathing and all of that. It's actually finding practices that clear the energy off of you, because we call it in my work emotional energy pollution, so just like sound pollution or noise pollution. We're just walking around like kind of sponging it off of each other and giving it off, by the way, it goes both ways. And so we have to find ways to clear that off of ourselves. Like nobody actually has the ability to just, I mean, I love the bubble, right? Because that's important. But, things penetrate through that barrier anyway, so we have to find active practices to clear that off. So for some people that's meditation, for some people it's bathing, for some people it's something else completely, exercise, anything that really gets things moving in your own energy system. So you start to distinguish between what's yours and what's not yours, and pretty soon it's easier to let go of the things that are not yours.
The one thing that you said that really struck me was, I think you used the word take on people's. So I think using empathy and that amazing superpower as a way to process that exchange. And the key word take on, to me, it's there's a use for pain, right? And when you take that from someone else or try to share it with them, they need that, right? That belongs to them, because that's a process they have to go through with that. And when you start messing around with it and trying to take it on, then that impedes their ability to deal with that. So when you use your empathy as a way to say, this is an experience and this is a season that you have to go through, and it's inappropriate for me to take it, right? Then your empathy switches to, I have empathy because you need to go through this season and you need to have this pain and you need to work through it because it's there for a reason. And walking beside someone, right? Being beside them and walking them through while they're going through that experience. And I think that's the thing, we get either one extreme or the other. We either want to take all that pain and be in it with them, or we just want to run away, because it's hard for us to walk alongside someone that's going through hell. And it's that's the brave part of an empath, is when they're able to say, you're going through hell right now. I can't do anything about that. That is your journey. That is your truth. But I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And the empaths in my life that I know have that superpower. And a lot of people dip. So we'd like to talk about these things as if they're dirty things, and they're not. Pain can be a beautiful, transformational thing. And that's a gift that you can give that person by not trying to take it on, but walking alongside them when they're going through. And empaths are better at that than anybody that I know. They just have to learn that skill of either, they don't want to run away. A lot of people don't know how to handle it. So the fact that you stay and then give them that gift of not trying to take it off of them, but the gift of being beside them when shit is ugly for them and showing them love anyway. You know what I'm saying? That is one tool that I've seen powerful empaths in my life, because I ain't shit. And I'd be when you get better, call me. Not everybody can do that, but the empaths in my life that know how to do it and have learned that skill have changed a lot of lives and have made a lot of people go through those seasons a lot easier because they had those people by their side. So I would say that.
Great question, great answer. Yes, those were wonderful and very helpful. Anyone else have any other questions?
Is this working? Yes. As a Minnesota filmmaker based in the Twin Cities, I frequently have to go into rural areas, and the big problem is with the polarization of American culture at the moment, the alt-right, the whole political scene. How do I, as a city sophisticate, trying to make a documentary with all of the artistic demands that it takes relate to a question of social class in a rural setting who basically would distrust city slickers, if you get my drift here. So how do you deal with the problem of social class in a state where you've got a very rigorous separation of classes? And the problem of empathy, and you don't have a lot of time to deal with their pain.
Yeah. So I don't want to be glib, because that's a very deep, complex question. But I think there's a lot of artists in the room right now, and I think art is one entry point into bridging those gaps in terms of like, a lot of the work that I do involves, I get brought out to like a college campus to do presentations on like masculinity and gender violence prevention and rape culture, or presentations on like whiteness and white supremacy. And I know right away that half that audience, more than half that audience, does not want to hear what I have to say about either of those topics. But sometimes starting with something like class, where if a bunch of the people in that audience are white and don't want to listen to stuff about white supremacy, maybe we start with a poem and a dialogue and a conversation on class identity. And have you ever felt exploited or discriminated against because of how you grew up or where you're from or whatever? And then that can hopefully build empathy for the next conversation. And again, this is an in the weeds kind of thing, but I think the larger point here being that art and those of us who create art have an enormous opportunity to use that art as an entry point into not just the capital P political side of these issues, but in the deeper kind of foundational empathy side of these issues. And I can just tell from my own specific personal experience that's working. When I travel to rural areas and suburbs and like community colleges all over in different states and different cities, that approach has done some really like beautiful things that give me hope.
Does anybody know that we used to have a rural-urban exchange in Minnesota? Has anybody heard about that? There used to be a program that was funded by the state that like took kids from like rural Minnesota and brought them to the city, and it took city kids and took them to the rural spaces, and it really helped that divide that you're talking about. And the point that I'm getting to is a lot of that division is happening because of the huge amount of propaganda that's been pushing this narrative that we're each other's enemies, and it's a okie doke because like we all really know what's really going on, but we keep falling into that same trap. And Blexit, the organization that I'm a part of and helped to, I was a founder of it, we're working on an experiment that I think is helpful too. It's called White Lie, and it's taking a white person and asking them to do the research on when their family became white. When was that moment? How did you benefit? And what was your ethnicity before? And if you were able to make that decision again today based on everything that your family was able to benefit from, or take that perceived privilege and power of whiteness, or would you want your ethnicity back? And then that person pays for a black person's genealogy and ancestry test, and then they go through that experience of how their ethnicity was stolen from them. But the truths are the same. Capitalism stole ethnicity from both groups while they're over here fighting about the same thing. So if we can start having a conversation about how white people sold out their ethnicities like for a fake race and perceived privilege and power, and no longer have a connection to their ethnicity and who they truly are, and how black people were stripped of that, then we have some commonality. And we can talk about what we lost. We can talk about the perceived gains of whiteness, and we can talk about the similarities that we have. And that's something that could be really powerful if we looked at that from like, a metro rural, approach. So we're gonna be filming that and then sharing it with the general public to start this conversation about this white lie, right? Because it's like it doesn't even fucking exist. But yeah. Great question. Great answer.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, here's a question.
Hello. Ooh. My name is Jazz. As a young African American woman who has been raising herself since I've probably been like 15, let's say, I don't have many resources, and I'm trying to go to school for like fashion apparel or either music production. So I was thinking about signing my rights over to the National Guard to pay for debt-free college. And I was wondering, as a lot of the older people in the room, if you guys have like any other ideas on how to progress as an artist and without having to go down that road. Because the reason why I'm an artist is because I struggle with conforming to structure, and I just like expressing myself through art and signing over for 6 years just to like get my career started, my necessities. I'll do it if I have to, but if you guys have some like alternatives, that would be blessings, because I'd rather not go down that road. I'd rather just like, I don't know. Do you guys
First of
have
all,
any take on this?
Can I just give you a standing ovation? Can we give her a standing ovation?
Thank you.
A young black woman at a conference, here to learn, raised herself, and asking about her future from people that she admires and respects. First of all, it seems like you got it. It seems like you got the juice.
Thank you.
And you brought yourself this far, and I'm still dumbfounded by your story. So I need to collect myself emotionally before I like go to church. And I'm gonna let the rest of the panel answer. But I just wanted the room to acknowledge your greatness.
Thank you so much.
And how you shared your story.
Yeah, I feel like there are a couple people in the audience who had very strong reactions to that question. So like, yeah, do y'all want to? There are two people. Yeah.
When I graduated high school, my mom and my little sister were homeless, and I took a year off to try to work to support them. And I finally decided that I need to put myself first, you know. And so I went back to college. I worked full time. And then if you spend your time doing what you're passionate about, people notice your passions. And a lot of people, like Prince, reached out to me to ask me to work for him. And so, you know, just sticking to who you are and not signing away your life, you can get really far just doing that.
There's someone right there who was jumping up and down.
Oh my God, I've been like jumping out of my seat since you first made that asked that question. First of all, thank you for asking that question, because that's a real question, and I'm gonna give you a real answer. This is how you pay for your school. There's 3 different options that I'm gonna tell you about right now. The first one is a program called Job Corps, where they will actually help you graduate from high school, and once you graduate the program, they give you training on things like administrative assistance, you know, being a maintenance person. You can choose various different career paths. What helped me, because I was also a non-traditional student, when I was graduating from high school, my parents refused to fill out the FAFSA. So I actually did not go to school till later on in life. There's 2 things you can do. One, which I recommend for you, is doing public service. Things like AmeriCorps. If you do a term of AmeriCorps, you get a scholarship for about $3,500 that you can use to any degree that you want. And you can also do up to 2 terms until you'll get a total of around $7,000 as a scholarship for your school. Any accredited school you can spend that money at. While you're in AmeriCorps, you can apply for food stamps. They will pay for your housing. I don't know if there's children involved, health insurance, so you'll be taken care of for those 2 years that you do public service. The third and last least ideal way to go to school is to, number one, just go to school, fill out the FAFSA. Well, I mean, you can't fill out the FAFSA as an adult until you're an adult. 2 things change that. 1, if you get married. 2, if you have a child. So once you're able to fill out the FAFSA, you can apply for student loans and financial aid that will help you get through. You can actually apply for a little bit more than what you have and invest that into your own business. So whether that's starting a label or doing fashion design, you reinvest that money back into your business. And that's how I went to college.
Yo, if she was in my workshop before, she's on her way, y'all. The thing is, you're on your way, you don't even know it yet. But we see it and we're here to support you, right? And like the two sisters before said, they gave you mad ideas, which don't include signing your life over to a government that thinks you're 3/5 of a person, and already on top of that won't give you health care, birth control, sees your womanhood as a pre-existing condition that it won't give you. So please don't sign your life away unless you are some type of undying patriot. You know what I'm saying? If you don't believe in the cause, don't sign up for it for money. You know, I just wanted to express that on top of the resources they gave, but also as a person that went through a non-traditional path, I'll have to say that work begets work. When you give yourself work and you show the work to the people, that begets work, right? Susan saw me somewhere, she brought me here. Work begets work. Give yourself work. Don't worry about everybody else. You might not get hired, but you will always be working.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the responses. I am 18, but like I don't have either of my parents in my life, so like just like hearing those responses was kind of like having that little parent figure, like, hey, this is what you need to do, because it's genuinely scary, like coming out into the real world and like getting hit with responsibility and not being taught like exactly what responsibility is, or like how to go about it, or where to take it, or what this is or that is and the third. So I just wanted to like say thank you for all the feedback and stuff, because it really has like gave me greater insight on that.
And just a quick observation that like this panel was supposed to be about survival, solidarity, and social justice, and like we can talk about those things, we can also see that. Like this was a perfect like modeling moment, right? So thank you all.
Yeah, completely, yeah. That was wonderful and awesome, and all the love that sort of came out to support you and to surround you. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot. Wait, where are we? Do we have more time, or are we still asking questions? Does anybody have any more questions? More questions, anyone?
Time for one more question if someone has it. Oh, you have your last question, right?
Oh, that's right. What is it that you would like from the room, right? Yes, that's the question, yes. So how would you like the room to support you, or what it is that you're doing, so.
All right, I'm gonna go. First, find a way to hire Jazz. Find a way to hire Jazz, I don't care what the job is, get with her, get with them. I don't know your pronouns, I'm just gonna say them. Get with Jazz and be like, I wanna hire you, we're gonna figure something out. That's that. Second, on every table, there are pledge cards on the table for Village Trust Financial Cooperative. That is a Black-led credit union that's gonna be based in North Minneapolis. We need the community to get behind this effort. I am the director of the Association for Black Economic Power, and helping to lead this effort. This idea came from the community, from a room of Black folks who decided that a Black-led financial institution should be the #1 priority for our community right now as economic resistance. So if you could fill one of those out, I got a box in the back, we can collect them. I got 2 Blexit t-shirts to give out to the first 2 people who are willing to host either a brown bag at their work or a presentation at their home, and I can come and talk about the credit union and more opportunities for pledging. And then a really fun caveat to that, take a picture with your pledge, tag @ABEPMN, and then challenge 5 of your friends to take the pledge too. And then we're gonna do a little thing where like we're gonna pick somebody out of that group and give out a $50 gift card to the new Worth Co-op grocery store in North Minneapolis. So $50 gift card, take a picture of yourself with the pledge once you've pledged, tag 5 of your friends, get at me.
Two quick things. One, for the last 5 years, True Art Speaks has organized the Be Heard Minnesota Youth Poetry Slam series every January through March. It's an unbelievable series. It's a series of like 8 different slams. The last 2 years, finals were at the Walker. This year, the finals are going to be at Stepping Stone in St. Paul. And I say that to say, like, you know, come to the events, but more so to say, listen to young people. Like, I need us to all listen more to young people because they know what they're talking about. And then also, just very, very briefly, I live in Minneapolis. I need you to vote. Yes. It's funny coming from a more like radical organizer background. Like I've always had a weird relationship with electoral politics. But the older I get, the more I see it as an incredibly valuable bottleneck, especially if you're frustrated with what's happening nationally and internationally. Becoming more educated and taking the time to go vote, whether early or on the day, about what's happening with our city council and our mayor has an enormous impact on people's lives. And it's such a simple little thing that we can do. I just threw up a bunch of links and resources. If you don't know what's going on and you live in Minneapolis, I threw up a bunch of links and resources on my website. I can totally share my card or whatever too. And yeah.
Couple things. If you consider yourself somebody who's interested in activism, I consider myself a spiritual activist, which means that I'm working on that level of waking people up on the inside. And it's an invitation to you because I think it's a really important time on the planet right now, and we're faced with a lot of opportunities for shifting, and I really believe that those shifts have to be happening internally if we're going to see them happening externally. So we're each responsible for that, and I know that at this time period we're feeling, at least a lot of people are feeling really powerless about what they can be doing, but the one place you really have the opportunity to do something with is yourself. So I would just ask people to make sure that they're really paying attention to that first and foremost. And then on a more personal level, I'm looking to connect with conscious organizations and arts organizations who are interested in having somebody come in and talk to your people about their limiting core beliefs and how they might be affecting their ability to make an impact in your organization. So if you're one of those people, let's talk. Thank you.
I think for me, just like as a plug, my film Action Commandant is screening tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I think, the venue is in the book, and just to say that it was voted the best South African documentary last year, and it also this year got nominated as best documentary at Black Star in Philadelphia. So it's been doing its thing, but it would be great to see you there and just to continue the conversation, because that film was, I think, for my community in Cape Town, a very important one, because it was one of the first to be told from the inside out and to be seen as a social activist. Well, not so, but an activist kind of film. And then secondly, also I think people should just continue sharing the love. I think it's very important for artists to feel the love, because it can be lonely sometimes. So yeah, and platforms like this are so important. Yeah.
This was awesome. Thank you all thanks everybody on the panel for being here and for opening up and being brave and sharing all your experience. Thank you everyone for listening and for also just connecting with what everyone's saying. This was awesome. This was fun. Yeah, totally.
You get to keep the couches though, right? I get to stay up here.
Wow.
All right. Thanks again to the panelists and our moderator. A great panel in the day. And the day went by quick. That was so fast to me.
It went pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah, that was really fast. Hopefully you got to experience some good discussions and enjoy the different parts of the building and different things and got something out of it and met some new people. That's kind of the goal of this, is kind of get those experiences. So hope that was your experience. And I know when I came from my first year, if it's your first time here, my first year was more just observing and figuring out what was happening. And I was able to be more effective the next time I came. I knew kind of what the lay of the land was. I kind of knew how to approach it. So hopefully that'll be your experience too, coming back next year. So yeah.
Yeah, so wow. Thank you for being here and for being here all day. For those of you who are still here, I appreciate it a lot. We were going to do a more formal exercise about just sort of reflecting on the day, but I think I'm going to just ask generally, does anybody have one thing that they are going to take away from today?
A big takeaway. You just shout it out. What was your biggest takeaway from the day? A quote, a moment, a topic, anything stand out? A
connection.
Community. I heard community. Anything else?
Now you're all shy. Or we didn't.
Everyone's shy.
That's the kind of question you're not supposed to ask, actually, I think. Oh, nobody got anything out of it. Okay, so we do have some things we have to just kind of in wrapping this up before we will have the happy hour afterwards here, just right behind the curtain. We'll open up the curtain. But before that, we need to. You guys are stuck.
Hang out with us.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit down.
So to wrap up a few of the administrative things, if you won one of the prizes, make sure you talk to, I'm going to say Camilla, and she'll make sure you get your prize. We need to acknowledge our sponsors for sure. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we couldn't do this if it weren't for them. So I appreciate it to those of you, especially who are still in the room. I also wanted to thank Lady K, who's our event planner this year. So those of you who were here before, you know this is a new venue and a new, so it's been really great. It's always good to find, we try to have vendors that fit with our values too, which is kind of a theme of today. And so certainly that's been a great fit for us. And I have a team here maybe. They're always hiding in the back at the end of the day. I don't know where they are. All right, is there anybody in the room? There's a couple. Yay. Look how embarrassed. They're so embarrassed. But now I really need to say something because all of the people that you see working here today, they're all volunteer. Like this team works for 4 months ahead of time. They show up every Monday night for a couple hours of sometimes fun, sometimes not so fun. And so it really, they're doing a lot for you to do this. So, here's my cry. But you have to let me thank Kevin. It's a big deal too for him. To be here for the whole day is a big deal, as for all of you. And he's been doing it with us for a long time. Yeah. So and for me, it's really important to work with somebody that I feel like represents us well, that we work well together. So I really appreciate you being here too.
I'm glad to be here every year.
I have a couple of businessy things to talk about. One is there've been several people in the room who are part of the low power FM stations in town, the radio stations. KRSM is one of them in South Minneapolis. Oh yeah. I think there are 5 people, well now more, but there are 5 or 6 people who have shows on KRSM who are part of Giant Steps. So Levi, Malik, you, me. So we have a show called Giant Steps Radio. It airs on Fridays and Sundays at 2 p.m. and 11 a.m. And it's a version of this where I talk to usually one person for a little more in-depth. So obviously here you get a conversation together, but we'll have a 40-minute conversation with somebody in this room. Samantha was one of them. And then we do another maybe 10 or 15-minute clips from past Giant Steps conversations. So pieces of this conversation will show up in a radio show at some point. So if you feel like it, you should listen in, or you should go listen to the back episodes, because there's a lot of really interesting people. Also, I have all of your names and email addresses, so you're now all potential guests for my radio show, okay? So, and then the other thing you may have seen in the program, we're launching something new. And it's not for everybody, but if you're in a position where you feel like you want the structure of meeting once a month, getting some additional in-depth content and learning, and exchange with other people, and accountability, and hopefully fun. We're offering this this series. I don't know what to call it. That's part of what the problem is. So that we'll have smaller groups, 10 to 15 people, to have these exchanges. And so if that's where you're at in your business or in your work, I think it'll be a good way. This is something that I have done with large executives from large corporations, but I know just from my own experience, having that I used to have a monthly accountability call with a friend of mine in DC who was very different than me, which helped a lot. So some of us need that, I think, to put in place to make sure we can show progress from 1 month to 6 months. So if that's something that's interesting to you, connect with me and I'll get you more information about how we can do that. I think that's it. Yeah?
All right. Well, thanks again for coming out and be a part of this. From everyone who's on stage or in the crowd, everyone's important for this event to make it happen. So thank you so much, and please hang around. Happy hour.
And an extra thank you to Lisa.
Oh, yeah.
Who's been, and also to DJ Keezy.
DJ Keezy, yeah.
Keezy's been on the radio show too.
So yeah, let's hang out, network, meet people, do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's cold outside. You don't want to leave yet. Thank you.